interested in politics?
Great question. I wasn't interested in politics for most of my life, actually. Went to Westmont College, got a degree in philosophy and religious studies from Westmont. Worked with Young Life for years and was very happy doing ministry and outreaching to kids. I actually came to know Christ through Young Life when I was 16 years old, so it was a very important ministry to me. Went to Fuller Seminary and was working at Bellard Presbyterian Church. I had a professor at Fuller who was very liberal, and I sat there during the ethics class going, I don't know if I agree with all this stuff, and that kind of got me down this road of wanting to have good discussions with him, and so I would do my research and kind of got more and more into it. My first real kind of campaign that I got involved with was Bush 04, and I didn't do a lot. I just kind of went to some events and volunteered a little bit. And then Schwarzenegger in 2005 ran some very conservative ballot initiatives, and that was the first time I actually got paid to do anything in politics. I walked doors, walked neighborhoods and knocked on doors, and that was kind of my first entry into paid politics, and I figured that I really liked it. I wrote in the student newspaper at Fuller Seminary and just fell in love with kind of the debates that were happening in the public square around public policy and the things that we wanted to be involved with. I graduated, or was very close to graduating Fuller. I had one semester left and I could basically do that online. So I said, well, let's move to Washington, D.C. and give this a try. So I moved out there, didn't have a job, didn't know anybody. It took me 6 weeks to learn that you got to intern to get anywhere out there, and found a senator from Pennsylvania I'd never heard of named Rick Santorum, who was looking for interns, and I interned there and ended up with a job in the senator's leadership office, which was the Senate Republican Conference, and worked there for a bit until he lost the election in 2006, and he and his chief of staff, a guy named Mark Rogers, he and I went out and formed a consulting firm kind of modeled after William Wilberforce, who's one of our kind of heroes and patron saints in public policy engagement, and spent a number of years there working on lots of campaigns for lots of different organizations. We're kind of a campaign strategy and consulting firm. Was part of Rick's team in 2012 when he ran for president, and that was just very exciting because if you may not know, but he actually won Iowa that year and had a lot of momentum really early on, challenging Governor Romney, and we were basically building a campaign as it was taking off. We got a bunch of interns and we're putting desks together in an office, just literally through the drywall of my consulting firm, and trying to build a national campaign as quickly as we could, and a lot of great people involved with that, and we had a lot of fun. And then was one of the handful of people that, when Rick lost the primary, went over and served Governor Romney during the general election. So got to be a part of 2 different presidential teams that year, which was incredible experience. It was a lot of fun.
So how did you transition from there, going into the Centennial Institute? How did you meet John? How did you come here?
Yeah, great question. So we were in D.C. when Rick was running his primary, and D.C. is a really fun place when you're young and single. When you have a family, it becomes a lot more difficult, especially when you want to spend time with your family, you want to coach your kids' sports, you want to be home on the weekends. So we decided that the best thing for us to do for our family was to leave Washington, D.C. and come back to Colorado, and that's where we wanted to raise our kids. So we moved back here. Governor Romney was looking for a coalitions director here in Colorado. Coalitions are people on a campaign that work with different kind of subgroups of voters. So we worked with students, voters, veterans, African Americans, Hispanics, evangelicals, Catholic groups. So you kind of try to find the different voting segments that are out there and create events around them and bring speakers in and that type of thing. So I was Governor Romney's coalitions director in 2012 here in Colorado, and that's where I first met John. John was running the Centennial Institute, and we went down there as the campaign and met with John, and then went to the Western Conservative Summit, and I managed an exhibitor booth at the summit the first time, and we were getting people signed up and registered to vote there. After Governor Romney's campaign, I created my own company, which was a digital advertising company, and we helped candidates and issues and organizations and companies all around Colorado with their digital advertising, and one of our clients was the Centennial Institute. They needed help kind of building their digital presence, so got to know John there and worked with him for about let's see, 2 or 3 years doing that, and helping even live tweet the Western Conservative Summit and do all their digital advertising. And so we got to know the internals of the Centennial Institute pretty well. John told me he was retiring, and I said, well, do you think I should throw my hat in the ring? And he said, sure. And he sent my resume to Bill Armstrong, and he ignored it. John told me to send it again. I sent it again, and he ignored it. And I told John I wasn't getting any response. He told me to send it again. Bill ignored it. And then Bill one day called one of his good friends, who is a guy named Walt Klein, who's also in the ad agency business here in Colorado. And he said, he was really a mentor of mine. He said, Walt, I'm having a hard time finding the person that I want. And Walt goes, well, you should talk to this guy named Jeff Hunt. And Bill goes, I keep hearing about this guy. He keeps sending me his resume. I don't know who he is, though. And so finally he gave me a shot, and it worked out that way. So persistence paid off in that sense, and having good friends that were surrounding Bill, John Andrews and Walt Klein, paid off. So that's how it came to be.
So who/what would you say have been your major political influences growing up?
Great question. So my biggest political influence is probably William Wilberforce. And if you've seen the film Amazing Grace, then you probably know about him, and I strongly recommend it. It's a great film to watch, especially if you're going home for Thanksgiving or Christmas. So Wilberforce was a parliamentarian back in the late 1700s in London. He was elected to Parliament first, and he was very successful. He was like a young Paul Ryan. So very successful, moving up, great speaker, and but he was empty inside. He came to know faith while he was in Parliament, and that's not unusual. In fact, Rick Santorum came to faith while he was a young congressman. Bill Armstrong came to faith while he was a young congressman. So that does happen out there. But it happened to William Wilberforce, and Wilberforce felt that he needed to leave Parliament and become a pastor full-time. And the person that led him to faith, who was the actual writer of the song Amazing Grace, encouraged him to stay exactly where he was. And he had a huge influence because he was driven by his faith to engage the public square. So it was often said of Wilberforce that he was too religious by his conservative friends and too conservative by his liberal friends. So he was kind of operated in this kind of no man's land where he's really driven by his faith. And a lot of the conservatives at the time thought that he was a little bit too much driven by his faith. And then his liberal friends thought he was just far too conservative. And that really does hit the nail on the head with regards to how we want to operate the Centennial Institute. We believe in Jesus first, and that's where we get all of our public policy positions and principles from. So oftentimes we're talking to our conservative friends about things that sometimes conservatives really aren't engaging. How to alleviate poverty, how to reform education, how to make sure that we're good stewards of the environment, how we're protecting religious freedom for all faiths. And so, that's very important to us, and that's the type of stuff that we work on. But Wilberforce was known for engaging at any one time 60 issues. A lot of times people say to the religious right, well, you only care about 2 issues, abortion and marriage. Wilberforce was working on everything. In fact, he was the first one to ever create the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. And you go, well, why is he working on that? Well, for a few reasons. One is he understood that we're commanded by God to be good stewards of his creation. And back during the time that Wilberforce was operating in, there was a lot of animal fighting that was taking place. It was called bull baiting. So they basically put a bull in the square, tie it down, and this is where you got bulldogs from. They would sick dogs on them, and then they'd bet to see which dogs could actually kill the bull. And what it did is it created a general coarsening of society. There was just this kind of violence that existed everywhere, and Wilberforce understood that if you really wanted to reform society, he needed to try to get these practices out of there. So he focused a lot on public education for the poor, because back then, the only people who went to school were the rich. And if you think about the Victorian Revolution, you think about London, you think about kind of proper people in London, that really didn't exist prior to Wilberforce. He kind of ushered in this notion of making goodness fashionable, which is actually the theme of the 2017 Western Conservative Summit. That how do you actually get a society that respects and honors and uplifts goodness and good values? We all believe that politics is downstream of culture, right? So what's happening on television, what people consume freely through video games, online, that's far more impactful on people than any bill that's going to be written down at the state capitol or something. That is the result of what's happening in culture, and so we need to be engaging culture. Wilberforce was very passionate about that, and so we are too here at the Centennial Institute. That's why we brought in the Duck Dynasty folks who are engaging culture and have one of the biggest TV shows on cable. We brought in Megan Alexander from Inside Edition, people that are believers that are seeding culture. And so we take a lot of our cues from William Wilberforce. So if you want to know more about me, understand Wilberforce. And Eric Metaxas has a great book about him, and then go see the film Amazing Grace, which will give you a really good sense of who he is.
Perfect. So what is the vision/mission of Centennial Institute?
Yeah. Great question. So a lot of people ask, why is there a think tank at Colorado Christian University, right? I get that a lot. And it's a good question. We have a set of strategic objectives that the board and Bill Armstrong put into place under his kind of leadership that have been kind of driving the university. And one of those strategic objectives, which we have right here, is to impact our culture in support of traditional family values, the sanctity of life, compassion for the poor, biblical view of human nature, limited government, personal freedom, free markets, natural law, original intent of the Constitution, and Western civilization. So the Centennial Institute exists to really fulfill that strategic objective, so to impact culture, and that's where I always like to start. It's not just to impact public policy, which is important, that's one aspect of culture, but to look at what we freely consume in our films and our video games and television and how we can speak into that. That's going to be kind of a new feature here at the Centennial Institute. We have construction going on. The notion of a strategic objective that calls Christians to impact culture, and there's a lot to unpack in there. First is that we do want to shape public policy, but public policy is only one aspect of culture. It's much broader than that, and if you can get to what people are consuming freely, their video games, their movies, their television, you can actually have a very big impact. And so that's something new you're going to see at the Centennial Institute, is how do we actually impact culture. And then the other aspect of that is the idea that you're making an impact. And so we do have to fight battles sometimes, things like doctor-assisted suicide that threaten the poor and the weak and the infirm and the disabled in our communities. We're going to stand boldly with them, and we're going to do it in a way that protects the sanctity of life, which is part of that strategic objective. And so to be impactful sometimes, not always. We want to find common ground. We want to be co-belligerent. We want to find areas that we can work together on with our friends that might not share the same views that we do. But in cases where you're in a battle over a yes or no vote or those types of things, when it comes down to the values that we hold that are very sacred to us, the sanctity of life, compassion for the poor, free markets, all that stuff that we talk about, there are times that we have to fight hard, and you're going to see that from the Centennial Institute, that we're going to be bold on what we believe, and we're going to try to make an impact according to our strategic objective.
Perfect. So how do you see the Centennial Institute influencing political thought in America?
Yeah, so great question. Centennial Institute influences political thought in a variety of different ways. Our flagship event is the Western Conservative Summit, which is the largest gathering of conservatives outside of Washington, D.C. That really has become a national event. Just this last year, we had President-elect Donald Trump come. We had 300 media outlets cover the event, including all major national television television networks that covered the event. So it really has become a national event. We're going to continue to do that. We have about 30 policy fellows that volunteer with the Centennial Institute, and they are professionals that have expertise in a variety of different ways, whether it's national defense, religious liberty, economics, and they publish white papers for us. And these are thoughtful, in-depth public policy white papers that are very important to helping shape thought from down down at the Colorado State Capitol to just our supporters and our attendees at the summit. They also get a lot of these different white papers. And then the most important thing that we do here is we raise up the next generation of leaders. We have incredible interns and 1776 scholars. These are folks that apply, students that apply to the Centennial Institute and volunteer with us. Some get paid. So if you're looking for a job, you can also consider working here. But really our passion, probably more than anything else, even more than the Western Conservative Summit or the kind of in-depth public policy papers that we do, is to raise up the next William Wilberforce, the next Hannah More, the next Clarence Thomas, the next Betsy Ross, these folks that are going to be making a big difference in the nation, that are inspired by their faith to be in the public square. They're called by God. And that's very important, because I think there's a lot of people out there, especially in the faith community, that believe that Christians should really stay away from anything political or anything in the public square. And that's deeply problematic. God has created a very diverse body, and He has called some people to be in the public square. And we want to help equip them that as they head out from Colorado Christian University down to the state capitol or to Washington, D.C., that they are going to be equipped with principles and values to be able to take whatever comes their way and to evaluate it in the context of their faith and make the best decisions for the communities that they represent. And so it's exciting. You got to come up here and meet some of our 1776 scholars, get to know them, and if you want to be a part of it, by all means stop by. We'd love to have you be a part of what we're doing.